I'm Earl Weinberg, and welcome to Bookspot. This time we'll continue our reading of The Rolling Stones by Robert Heinlein. Charlie's Hole, they decided, had once been a tow tank to deliver oxygen to a colony. They let themselves into the lock, started it cycling. When pressure was up, they tried the inner door. It wouldn't budge. Pollock started pounding on it with his belt wrench while Castor searched for a switch or other signal. The lock was miserably lighted by a scant 3 inches of glow tube. Cut the racket, Castor told Pollux. If he's alive, he's heard you by now. Pollux complied and tried the door again, still locked. They heard a muffled voice. Who's there? Castor looked around for the source of the voice, could not spot it. Castor and Pollux Stone, he answered, from the Rolling Stone out of Luna. Somebody chuckled. You don't fool me, and you can't arrest me without a warrant. Anyhow, I won't let you in. Castor started to explode. Pollux patted his arm. We aren't cops. Shucks, we aren't old enough to be cops. Take your helmets off. Don't do it, Castor cautioned. He could recycle while we're unsealed. Pollux went ahead and took his off. Castor hesitated, then followed. Let us in, Pollux said mildly. Why should I? We're customers. We want to buy things. What you got to trade? We'll pay cash. Cash, said the voice. Banks, governments. What have you got to trade? Any chocolate? Cass, whispered Pollux, have we got any chocolate left? Maybe 6 or 7 pounds, not more. Sure we got chocolate. Let me see it. Castor interrupted. What sort of nonsense is this? Paul, let's go back and see Mr. Fries again. He's a businessman. The voice moaned, Oh, don't do that. He'll cheat you. Then open up. After a few seconds of silence, the voice said wheedlingly, You look like nice boys. You wouldn't hurt Charlie, not old Charlie. Of course not. We want to trade with you. The door opened at last. In the gloom, a face, etched by age and darkened by raw sunlight, peered out at them. Come in easy. Don't try any tricks. I know you. Wondering if it were the sensible thing to do, the boys pulled themselves in. When their eyes adjusted to the feeble circle of glow tube in the middle of the space, they looked around while their host looked at them. The tank, large outside, seemed smaller by the way it was stuffed. As in Fry's shop, every inch, every strut, every nook was crammed, but where the city hall was neat, this was rank disorder. Where Fry's shop was rational, this was nightmare confusion. The air was rich, rich enough, but ripe with ancient and nameless odors. Their host was a skinny monkey of a man covered with a single dark garment, save for head, hands, and bare feet. It had once been, Pollux decided, heated underwear for spacesuit use far out starside or in caves. Old Charlie stared at them, then grinned, reached up, and scratched his neck with his big toe. Nice boys, he said. I knew you wouldn't hurt Charlie. I was just fooling. We wouldn't hurt anybody. We just wanted to get acquainted and do a little business. We want to, Pollux started. Castor's elbow cut off the rest. Castor went on, Nice place you've got here. Comfortable, practical, just right for a man with no nonsense about him. Good place for a man who likes to be quiet and think. Good place to read a book. You boys like to read? Sure, love to. Want to see my books? Without waiting for an answer, he darted like a bat into the gloom, came back in a few moments with books in both hands and a half dozen held by his feet. He bumped to a stop with his elbows and offered them. They were old-style bound books. Most of them, the twins saw, ship's manuals of ships long dead. Castor's eyes widened when he saw the dates on some of them and wondered what the Astrogation Institute would pay for them. Among them was a dog-eared copy of Mark Twain's Life on the Mississippi. Look 'em over, boys. Make yourselves comfortable, but you didn't expect to find a literary man out here among these yokels. You boys can read, can't you? Sure we can. Didn't know. They teach such funny things nowadays. Quote a bit of Latin to 'em and they look like you're crazy in the head. You boys hungry? You want something to eat? He looked anxious. They both assured him they had fed well and recently. He looked relieved. Old Charlie ain't one to let a man go hungry, even if he hasn't got enough for himself. Castor had noted a net of sealed rations. There must have been 1,000 of them by conservative estimate, but the old man continued. See, the time was right here in this snow. No, it was the Emmylou. When a man didn't dare make breakfast without he barred the lock first and turned off his beacon. It was about that time that Leif Dermont ate high grade Henderson. He was dead first, naturally, but it brought on a crisis in our community affairs. They formed up the vigilantes, what they call the committee nowadays. Why did he eat him? Why, he was dead. I told you that. Just the same, I don't think a man ought to eat his own partner, do you? The boys agreed it was a breach of etiquette. I think he ought to limit it to members of his own family, unless the two of them have got a signed and sealed contract. Seen any ghosts yet? The acceleration was so sharp it left both the twins a bit confused. Ghosts? You will. Many's the time I've talked to High Grade Henderson. Said he didn't blame Leif a bit, would have done the same thing in his place. Ghosts all around here. All the rockmen that have died out here, they can't get back to Earth. They're in a permanent orbit, see? It stands to reason you can't accelerate anything that doesn't have mass. He leaned toward them confidentially. Sometimes you see them, but mostly they whisper in your headphones. And when they do, listen, because that's the only way you'll ever find any of the big strikes that got found and then lost again. I'm telling you this because I like you, see? So listen. If it's too faint, just close your chin valve and hold your breath. Then it'll become clearer. They agreed and thanked him. Now tell me about yourselves, boys. To their surprise, he appeared to mean it. When they slowed down, he taxed them for details, fitting in only occasionally with his own disjointed anecdotes. At last, Castor described the fiasco of the flatcats. So that's why we don't have much food to trade with, but we do have some chocolate left and a lot of other things. Charlie rocked back and forth from his perch in the air. Flat cats, eh? I ain't had my hands on a flat cat for a power of years. Nice to hold, they are. Nice to have around. Philosophical if we just understand them. He suddenly fixed Castor with his eye. What you planning to do with all those flat cats? Why, nothing, I guess. That's just what I thought. You wouldn't mind giving a poor old man who hasn't kith nor kin nor wife nor chick one of those harmless flat cats? An old man who would always give you a bite to eat and a charge for your soup bottle? Castor glanced at Pollux and agreed cautiously that any dicker they reached would certainly include a flat cat as a mark of faith in dealing. Then what do you want? You talked about scooters. You know old Charlie hasn't got a scooter except the one I have for myself to stay alive. Castor broached the notion about repairing old parts fitting together a scooter. Charlie scratched an inch-long stubble. Seems to me I did have a rocket motor. You wouldn't mind if it lacked a valve or two? Or did I trade that to Swede Gonzales? No, that was another one. I think, just a second while I take a look. He was gone more nearly 600 seconds, buried in the mass. He came out dragging a piece of junk behind. There you are, practically new. Nothing a couple of bright boys couldn't fix. Pollux looked at Castor. What do you think it's worth? Castor's lips moved silently. He ought to pay us to take it away. It took them another 20 minutes, but they got it for 3 pounds of chocolate and 1 flat cat. Chapter 17, Flat Cat's Financial. It took the better part of 2 weeks to make the ancient oxy-alcohol engine work, another week to build a scooter rack to receive it using tubing from Fry's second-hand supply. It was not a pretty thing, but with the Stone's stereo gear mounted on it, it was an efficient way to get around the node. Captain Stone shook his head over it and subjected it to endless tests before he conceded that it was safe, even though ugly. In the meantime, the committee had decreed a taxi service for the doctor lady. Every miner working within 50 miles of City Hall was required to take his turn at standby watch with his scooter, with a fixed payment in high grade for any run he might have to make. The Stones saw very little of Edith Stone during this time. It seemed as if every citizen of Rock City had been saving up ailments. But they were not forced to fall back on Hazel's uninspired cooking. Fry's had the stone warped into contact with City Hall and a passenger tube sealed from the stone's lock to an unused hatch of the bigger ship. Mrs. Fry's was an excellent cook, and she raised a great variety in her hydroponic garden. While they were rigging the scooter, the twins had to mull over the matter of the flatcats. It had dawned on them that here in Rock City was a potential unexploited market for flatcats. The question was how best to milk it for all the traffic would bear. Paul suggested that they peddle them in the scooter. He pointed out that a man's sales resistance was lowest, practically zero, when he actually had a flat cat in his hands. His brother shook his head. No good, Junior. Why not? One, the captain won't let us monopolize the scooter. You know how he regards it as ship equipment built by the crew, namely us. Two, we would burn up our profits in scooter fuel. Three, it's too slow. Before we could move a third of them, some idiot would have fed our first sale too much. It has kittens, and there you are, with the market flooded with flat cats. The idea is to sell them as nearly as possible all at one time. We could stick up a sign in the store, one price would let us, and sell them right out of the stone. Better, but not good enough. Most of these rats shop only every 3 or 4 months. No, sir, we've got to build that better mousetrap and make the world beat a path to our door. I've never been able to figure out why anybody would want to trap a mouse. Decompress the compartment and you kill all of them every time. Just a figure of speech, no doubt, Junior. What can we do to make Rock City flat cat conscious? They found a way. The belt, for all its lonely reaches, or because of them, was as neighborly as a village. They gossiped among themselves by suit radio. Out in the shining blackness, it was good to know that if something went wrong, there was a man listening not 500 miles away who would come and investigate if you broke off and did not answer. They gossiped from node to node by their more powerful ship's radios. A rumor of death or a big strike or of accident would bounce around the entire belt, relayed from rockman to rockman at just short of the speed of light. Heartbreak node was 66 light minutes away, following orbit. Big news often reached it in less than 2 hours, including numerous manual relays. Rock City even had its own broadcast. Twice a day, one price picked up the news from Earthside, then rebroadcast it with his own salty comments. The twins decided to follow it with one of their own on the same wavelength, a music and chatter show with commercials. Oh, decidedly with commercials. They had hundreds of spools in stock, which they could use, then sell, along with the portable projectors they had bought on Mars. They started in. The show never was very good, but on the other hand, it had no competition and it was free. Immediately following Fry's turn off, Castor would say, "Don't go away, neighbors. Here we are again with 2 hours of fun and music and a few tips on bargains. But first, our theme, the warm and friendly purr of a Martian flat cat." Pollux would stroke Fuzzy Britches by the microphone. The good-natured little creature would always respond with a loud buzz. Wouldn't it be nice to come home to that? And now for some music. Harry Weinster's Sunbeam 6 in high gravity. Let me remind you that this tape, like all the other music on this program, may be purchased at an amazing savings in Flat Cat Alley right off City Hall, as well as Ajax three-way projectors in the giant junior model for sound, sight, and stereo. The Sunbeam 6. Hit it, Harry. Sometimes they would do interviews. Castor. A few words on what our leading citizen, Rocks in the Head Rudolph, says. Mr. Rudolph, all Rock City is waiting to hear from you. Tell me, do you like it out here? Pollux. Nah. Castor. But you're making lots of money, Mr. Rudolph, right? Pollux. Nah. Castor. At least you're bringing in enough high grade to eat well? Nah. No? Tell me, why did you come out here in the first place? Pollux. Bub, was you ever married? Sound effect of blow with blunt instrument, groan, and the unmistakable cycling of an airlock. Castor. Sorry, folks, my assistant has just spaced Mr. Rudolph. To the purchaser of the flat cat we'd been saving for Mr. Rudolph, we will give away absolutely free a beautiful pinup picture printed in gorgeous living colors on fireproof paper. I hate to tell you what these pictures ordinarily sell for on series. It hurts me to say how little we're letting them go for now until our limited stock is exhausted. To the very first customers who come in that door wanting to purchase a flat cat, we will lock that door, lock that door. All right, all right. 3 of you will receive pinup pictures. We don't want anyone fighting here. But you'll just have to wait until we finish this broadcast. Sorry, neighbors, a slight interruption, but we settled it without bloodshed. But I find myself in a dilemma. I made you a promise and I did not know what would happen. But the truth is, too many customers were already here pounding on the door of Flat Cat Alley. But to make good our promise, I am enlarging it. Not the first customer, not the second, nor the third, but the next 20 persons purchasing flat cats will go absolutely free one of these gorgeous pictures. Bring no money. We accept high grade or core material at the standard rates. Sometimes they varied it by having Mead sing. She was not of concert standard, but she had a warm, intimate contralto, and after hearing her, a man possessing not even a flat cat felt lonely indeed. She pulled even better than the slick professional recordings. The twins found it necessary to cut her in for a percentage. But in the main, they depended on the flat cats themselves. The boomers from Mars, almost to a man, bought flat cats as soon as they heard that they were available, and each became an unpaid traveling salesman for the enterprise. Hard rock men from Luna or directly from Earth who had never seen a flat cat now had opportunities to see them, pet them, listen to their hypnotic purr, and were lost. The little things not only stirred to aching, suppressed loneliness, but having stimulated it, gave it an outlet. Castor would hold Fuzzy Britches to the mic and say, "Here's a little darling, Molly Malone, sing for our boys, honey pet." While he stroked Fuzzy Britches, Pollux would step up the power. "No, we can't let Molly go. She's a member of the family. But here's Bright Eyes. We'd like to keep Bright Eyes too, but we mustn't be selfish. Say hello to the folks, Bright Eyes." Again, he would stroke Fuzzy Britches. "Mr. P, now hand me Velvet." The stock of flat cats in deep freeze steadily melted. Their stock of high grade grew. Roger Stone received their suggestion that they save out a few for breeding stock with one of his more emphatic refusals. Once, he declaimed, was enough to be swamped in flat cats. Fuzzy Britches could stay safely on short rations, but one was enough. They had reached the last few at the back of the hold and were thinking about going out of business when a tired-looking, gray-haired man showed up after their broadcast. There were several other customers. He hung back and let the twins sell flat cats to the others. He had with him a little girl, little older than Lowell. Castor had not seen him before, but he guessed that he might be Mr. Erskine. Bachelors far outnumbered families in the node, and families with children were very rare. The Erskines picked up a precarious living down orbit and north. They were seldom seen at City Hall. Mr. Erskine spoke basic with some difficulty. Mrs. Erskine spoke it not at all. The family used one of the little lingos. Icelandic, it might have been. When the other customers had left the Stone, Castor put on his professional grin and introduced himself. Yes, it was Mr. Erskine. "And what can I do for you today, sir? A flat cat?" "I'm afraid not." "How about a projector with a dozen tapes thrown in? Just the thing for family evenings." Mr. Erskine seemed nervous. Very nice, I'm sure, but no." He tugged at the little girl's hand. "We better go now, baby." "Don't rush off. My baby brother is around somewhere, or was. He'd like to meet your kid. Maybe he's wandered over into the store. I'll look for him." "We better go." "What's the rush? He can't be far." Mr. Erskine swallowed in embarrassment. "My little girl, she heard your program and she wanted to see a flat cat. Now she's seen one, so we go." "Oh." Castor brought himself face to face with the child. "Would you like to hold one, honey?" She did not answer, but nodded solemnly. "Mr. P, bring up the Duchess." "Right, Mr. C." Pollux went aft and fetched the Duchess, the first flat cat that came to hand, of course. He came back, warming it against his belly to revive it quickly. Castor took it and massaged it until it flattened out and opened its eyes. "Here, honey bunch, don't be afraid." Still silent, the child took it, cuddled it. The small furry bundle sighed and began to purr. Castor turned to her father. Don't you want to get it for her? The man turned red. No, no. Why not? They're no trouble. She'll love it. So will you. No. He reached out and tried to take the flat cat from his daughter, speaking to her in another language. She clung to it, replying in what was clearly the negative. Castor looked at them thoughtfully. You would like to buy it for her, wouldn't you? The man looked away. I can't buy it. But you want to. Castor glanced at Pollux. Do you know what you are, Mr. Erskine? You are the 500th customer of Flat Cat Alley. Huh? Didn't you hear our grand offer? You must have missed some of our programs. The 500th Flat Cat is absolutely free. The little girl looked puzzled but clung to the flat cat. Her father looked doubtful. You are fooling? Castor laughed. Ask Mr. P. Pollux nodded solemnly. The bare truth, Mr. Erskine. It's a celebration of a successful season. One flat cat absolutely free with the compliments of the management. And with it goes either one pickup or two candy bars, your choice. Mr. Erskine seemed only half convinced, but they left with the child clinging to Duchess and the candy bars. When the door was closed behind them, Castor said fretfully, You didn't need to chuck in the candy bars. They were the last. I meant us to sell them. I didn't mean us to sell them. Well, we didn't sell them. We gave them away. Castor grinned and shrugged. Okay, I hope they don't make her sick. What was her name? I didn't get it. No matter, or Mrs. Fries will know. He turned around, saw Hazel behind them in the hatch. What are you grinning about? Oh, nothing, nothing. I just enjoy seeing a couple of cold cash businessmen at work. Money isn't everything. Besides, added Pollux, it's good advertising. Advertising? With your stock practically gone? She snickered. There wasn't any grand offer, and I'll give you 6 to 1. It wasn't your 500th sale. Castor looked embarrassed. Oh, she wanted it. What would you have done? Hazel moved up to them and put her arm around each neck. My boys, I'm beginning to think you may grow up yet. In 30, 40, 50 more years, you may be ready to join the human race. Oh, lay off it. And we will follow them further next time.